I wasn't expecting you to be having that look when I came to here, but welcome everybody.
Did you see this episode?
True.
Just setting the stage, bro.
If I was much better at video editing, I could spaghettify both of us right now. But welcome everybody back to the Pixelists Podcast.
I just had this random thought of me, like, what if I saw like a different episode and I was like, what do you mean spaghettify?
What are you talking about?
which logically would not make sense because we've done all of the previous ones, but continue with your intro.
I'm with you.
Ruining. So
nope, you guys know the drill. All the nerdy things we enjoy. I'm Will. That's Blake. Today we're here talking about Loki, season 2, episode 4. And before we get straight into it, real quick, any announcements? Not really. Nothing out of the ordinary. All of our usual stuff. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Got a lot of great people always chatting and hanging out in there, talking all sorts of things. A lot of D&D mostly. But would love to have you join. This Thursday, we're going to be watching Candela Obscura, the finale of Chapter 2.
If you haven't seen, it's a very wholesome and child-friendly show.
Definitely not, but yeah, it's been good. I'm excited for the finale. And then, I think we're going to be doing another watch party this upcoming Sunday as well, but the jury's still out on exactly what we're going to watch because we recently finished our Calamity and kind of our Calamity wrap-up. But we liked it so much we want to keep the ball rolling with those Sunday night watch parties. So that interests you, join the Discord. I was thinking maybe putting a poll and having people vote like what they wanted to see next. So
I'd say y'all throw out your suggestions and then we'll probably put together like a calendar. Like, hey, here's this month's or like the next 2 months or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So
parties going on in the Discord for all those things. So it'll be linked down in the description. Come hang out. Otherwise, let's just jump straight into this. So Loki episode 4, really, really quick recap. You might have to help me on this one because I really only remember the big moment basically, but essentially we've got Victor Timely coming back to the TVA after the events of last episode, and they're still trying to figure out how to fix this temporal loom. Victor Timely meets OB. They kind of, self-congratulate one another. Yeah. And they're trying to devise a way to fix the loom. So they get to work on that. Meanwhile, the bureaucracy, maybe that's not the right word, but of the TVA is they're trying to come together. We've got the, I can't remember her name, General Dox, and all of her men are still in prison. And so B-15 goes and is like, hey, like, we still want the same thing. Let's work together. But the general's not really feeling it. They stay in there. Meanwhile, Renslayer and Miss Minutes are kind of teaming up to do their own thing. Miss Minutes saying, like, maybe we don't even need Kang. Like, we can just do this, you and I. So they have their own plan they're enacting to get up on top of everybody else. And Renslayer actually comes and visits General Dox and all of these prisoners and is like, hey, join me. They all refuse except for X5, who is the actor guy. And then Brad. They brutally murder all of General Dox and the rest of them. And basically the episode culminates with, we do see Loki complete the full circle self-prune moment. We're going to talk about all this when we get into the discussion. But the episode ends with Victor Timely essentially deciding to be the one to go out on the bridge and install this temporal loom fix before everything goes haywire. The doors open. He runs out and just instantly gets spaghettified. And the loom, not having its fix in place, hits critical mass and explodes. And the episode basically ends cutting to black as this explosion is approaching all of them.
Yeah.
Anything important I left out there that you want to mention?
No, I think you nailed it all. So,
alrighty. Well, yeah, man.
Go ahead. Yeah, let's talk about it. I have watched this scene on YouTube, which I realized I was doing it on our Pixelists account. So I was like, oh gosh, I hope I don't spoil this for Will. Because you just watched it yesterday.
Yeah.
I watched it Thursday. So I guess 3 or 4 days earlier. And so I got really insecure all of a sudden of like, Will's gonna see my watch history, and
oh no, I didn't notice. So it was not
some
spoiled.
of it was like pretty revealing. Talking about this episode, but bro, this talk about a wild final few moments of an episode for television, period.
Yeah, especially consider the scene. They didn't show anything, but the scene with General Dox and all of her men too, like that was pretty brutal for like a Disney Plus, show. Not that, they haven't put some more adult things on there at this point, but still.
How about the nightmare fuel of Miss Minutes also being like,
yeah, she's crazy, man. What
she's sadistic.
I want to specifically talk more about her, but yeah, like she was like gleeful at these people being crushed.
Yeah. Signs that your AI companion might have a problem.
Yeah,
she finds pleasure in brutally murdering people.
Yeah.
I just loved the misdirect of the end of that episode, because we talked a lot about the suspicion of Victor Timely and like what's gonna happen, like how can they trust him, and also the brilliance of the writing of the previous episode. He's very clearly defined as a con man,
right?
So we're led to believe that he is going to con them in some way, right? So like I kept waiting for the angle, and in fact, when he was like, "I'll do it," I thought he was like going to go out there and just like look up and just be like, and just like throw the thing like off the side, Then again, like where would he go? It's like, you got to come back in here, right? So I just was waiting for it, and then when he ran out and just that scream, just the spaghettification, man, I was just like, I literally, it's rare that I watch a show where like my mouth is just open. Like I was just like, and like I looked at my wife and she was also just like, actually she was more like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, what? And then that finale, dude, those final moments, just insane.
Totally. Same reaction here. I loved I don't even know if it's fair to call it a subversion. I guess it is. But yeah, the whole episode, you're kind of on your toes, wondering like, when's the other shoe gonna drop? Like when he was getting the hot chocolate, it was like very suspicious, And I was like, okay, and I was like, I cannot believe they're letting him be the one to go do this, because I too thought it was like all part of his master plan, and like he was gonna make an adjustment or something. So yeah, I loved it. Love the writing, love the acting this episode. I don't think either of us have been like Loki is bad, but we were kind of like episode 2 felt a little off. But now, and I made my comments about episode 3 being a bit goofy, but if it had its purpose, I liked it.
Yeah.
Now with episode 4, I'm really liking like everything.
Well, I hate to say it, man, but I would say this episode had an amazing finale, but I would say this episode so well characterized what's great about Loki, and also characterized like the worst writing that just like drives me crazy.
What didn't you like this one?
Perfect example. So earlier they're like working on the little loom device, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's not working." And he's like, "I know the answer. Ka-ching! My perfect invention." And he's like, "That'll work." And you're like, "Wait, what is it?" And he's like, "I'll take it." And I'm just like, this is like, I hate when shows do this. Where like there's the MacGuffin, there's like the random object that's never explained what it is, and everyone in the room somehow knows what it means, like how to use it, and like, oh yeah, that'll be perfect. Like I hate that kind of stuff. So I feel like the start of it was very loose. I thought it was very reminiscent of some other things in season 2, where I've just been like, ooh, it's not really as tight as it was last season. Having said that, the back half felt phenomenal. So I don't know if there's like 2 different writing teams on this episode, but I will say I think we're a bit spoiled, or rather I'm a bit spoiled, because we watched this episode. We went back, Joy and I, and watched episode 4 from season 1. And now that's a season that is tight from like start to finish. In episode 4 last season, we had Mobius getting pruned. The great before that, like kind of the cat and mouse conversation with Renslayer, Loki and Sylvie fighting the timekeepers, Loki getting pruned. I mean, and I'm not saying like it was more epic. I just know from start to finish, it was just a lot tighter, I feel like. And yeah, so I'm with you with the final moments of it, but I still, a lot of the intrigue and mystery is just not as it's not as atmospheric for me as the first season was. And I don't think this episode avoids that entirely, I guess.
Okay.
So
I hear you.
Bring it on. What you got?
No, I hear you. I mean, I'll give you the scene with the MacGuffin. Essentially, he did pick that up last episode in his office and like stared at it. Not that that's like a sufficient, setup. So I mean, I'll give you that. I didn't really have a problem with it, but it definitely was like, a bit clunky. So like that one element aside, I liked the rest, even the beginning half of like the writing and stuff. I liked just the things that were set up, like between OB and, which I want to talk more about, Victor Timely, and like what came first, the chicken or the egg. So I did kind of like that, like, because you said everybody was like knew exactly what that was, but it was really just them two, right? Or was like Mobius and everyone else chiming in?
No, maybe what's the person's name? Casey?
Oh yeah, Casey.
Casey seemed a little bit, he was maybe fronting a little bit of like the I know what it is. Don't ask me to explain it, but
Well, the only thing that like doesn't make, so that would all make sense to me if like it was in the book, but it couldn't have been in the book because then OB would have known about it and like had the solution himself. So that's the part that like doesn't add up to me. But otherwise,
and it's kind of like my critique from either our last episode discussion or one before it, where there was so much shrouded in mystery in season 2 that you're kind of discovering. And this one feels like forced complexity of like every episode introduces a new like scientific term. We had the temporal loom. Then we had, he remains aura. We need his aura. And then we had like the device that they're building, like the resonator. And that like, it's just getting, there are so many levels of like the, oh, well then that's the Quarnox device that you got to use, that I'm kind of like, I don't know. For me, it just makes it so clunky. It's hard. It's very hard for me to move past some of these details.
I get what you're saying. But I feel like those are just like devices has several meanings here, but I feel like those are just like devices.
They're fake plot devices.
But but what I'll say is the plot
ahead, as opposed to like a legitimate, like Victor Timely getting spaghettified. That's a legitimate like moment of advancing the plot.
Right.
It feels like these things are like forced. Like, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I mean,
I get what you're saying. And like, again, with the one perfect addition that he had, I'm with you. But like I forgot what it was called, but like the device from episode 1 that Loki had to use, and like the temporal loom in and of itself, like those are like literal devices. And I get what you're saying with like the terminology, but like they are attached to narrative threads. And I feel like, like the whole thread of, well, the loom is going to explode. And so this is just like the TVA technological device that we have like attached to that plot thread. Like, this is how we might fix it. Or, like Loki, this is how we fix your time slipping. And maybe they could have like made a tighter like introduction to these things. But I don't feel like they're just pointless. Like, let's throw terminology at the wall. Like, at least mostly they've been like narratively tied to important threads that are happening. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't disagree that they have plot importance. I just don't think it's great writing. I think this has been a much weaker season, with the exception, like I mentioned, the finale of this episode very much reminded me of like the brilliance of season 1. And I don't think this season's bad either. I think the season's great. I just think I'm talking about a show that was S tier and probably my all-time favorite Disney Plus show that I would describe as this season. I'd say if someone asked me, I'd be like, it's a good show, but I wouldn't like previously what I would say when someone hadn't seen it, I'd be like, you got to watch it. It's one of the all-time best shows. It'd be like talking about Breaking Bad versus, I can't think of like an average show name, not average, but like, oh, that's a good show. Like if someone hadn't seen Breaking Bad, I'd be like, oh, you have to watch it.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean,
well,
maybe I'm being too harsh for how good the first season was.
Right now, and probably at the end of the season, I would agree that season 1 was better. Like season 1 was phenomenal, but I feel like you're writing this one off too early. Like we got 2 more episodes to go, and they're not necessarily going to fix.
I gotta set myself up for. I don't want to get hurt.
I hear what you're saying. And I just to reset the bar here, like just so everyone else is clear, what are you ranking the show right now out of 10?
Out of 10,
yeah.
Season 1, I'd give like a 9.5. I would give this one probably a 7.
Okay, so maybe I mean that's 7. Still good.
5. Yeah, still a good show. I hate that we keep doing this. I'd put Lord of the Rings, not Lord of the Rings. What's it called? Like
Rings of Power.
Rings of Power. I put Rings of Power at like maybe a 6, maybe a 5.5. So
okay,
maybe that's too harsh on Rings of Power. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
So what would you put season 2 at right now?
Right now, I feel like our scales are slight. Well,
if Rings of Power is like a 7, then Loki is season 2 is probably an 8, maybe an 8.5. And if that was the case, then I put season 1 at like a 9.8, like just barely away from perfection.
Yeah, I would give Loki like a clear 3 points over Rings of Power. So season like 2? If Rings of Power is a 5, Loki season 2 is an 8 for me.
Rings of Power wasn't that bad.
It wasn't. I mean, I think I've harshed on it since like in the time that's passed.
I think we've liked it less as time has gone on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess I just don't want to mischaracterize you as like hating this season, because I know that's not where you're coming from. But for me, I clearly had my gripes mainly with episode 2. But this one, like, and maybe it's recency bias for the second half of the episode, you know. I know that's like
true. Yeah, I've had a few days to kind of marinate on it and think about it. So that's true.
But I really liked it. There were like the acting was phenomenal to me, and
yes. That's one thing I will say is the acting has been extremely tight the entire season. I've very much enjoyed everyone who's been casted.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed at least some of the writing. Like there were certain moments that I was like, yes, like this is what Loki has done so well that the rest of the MCU like has not been doing well recently. The first scene that comes to mind when I say that, because I'm trying to think of examples, are Loki and Sylvie in the pie room.
Glad you brought this up.
And
what's the deal with the pie room though?
And I want to talk about that too.
You're going to want to talk about the dialogue though.
Yeah,
between
and
them,
the whole like the whole the cinematography also of this show has been gorgeous. So on a grand scale, I'm weighing all of those things, and they're making up for, you know, the little MacGuffin moment and stuff. But anyway, like the line about like I don't remember it word for word, but she's like, "What are we playing, gods?" And he says, "We are gods."
Mm-hmm.
I loved that, because I also loved the like because pre-Loki, the TV show, if like you saw like a Loki says we're gods on a script, you would immediately know like, okay, well, he's being like a narcissistic asshole saying he's a god and that's why he should be able to do what he wants. But like that's completely flipped on its head here. Like that's not the context he's saying it in. It's like he's saying it in a selfless way. Like,
yeah, we're accountable. Like, yeah, we owe it to these people. Yeah.
So I loved that.
Which is a great, you call it flipping it, but I mean, it's great how that counters the Loki we see in episode 1 of season 1.
Yeah.
That character's really developed quite a bit over the last 2 seasons. But also, you know, it was interesting, her and Sylvie having this conversation. there's been so much back and forth where it's I mean, really, honestly, I feel like I don't know who the director is or if it's different. Sometimes it changes per episode, but I feel like they're just letting these actors really like work their chops.
Yeah.
Because like that line, "We are gods," could have been. I mean, there are so many different ways that could have been delivered that just like wouldn't quite capture what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And Tom Hiddleston like nailed it. I mean, I was like, ooh, that was really good.
What are we? Some kind of Loki season 2? But yeah, so I'm enjoying it, and a lot of like, aside from like the meta criticisms, I'm like really excited about where these final 2 episodes are heading based on all the things that have been set up and like the subversions that we've had. Like one kind of to move into talking about things about the episode, unless you had other things to say about but one of like the big things that I've really loved about this show as a whole, and also this season, is just that like I feel like I have ideas for like what could happen, which, you know, any show you watch, you're like, okay, yeah, I think this is where they're going with this. But with Loki in particular, like I have my ideas, but like it could so easily be the exact opposite. Like, and to dilute that down to a singular example, this Victor Timely thing where he's volunteers to go do it. You know, we were both like, oh, this is where he's making his move. But in fact, the exact opposite was true. Like he really was like earnestly, you know, trying to be heroic, and he just gets spaghettified. Like, is Miss Minutes like really evil and is out here just for herself, and she and Renslayer are on their own? Or is this really the whole plan all along, and every move she makes has been calculated? You know, like I don't know which one of those is true, and I feel like either one could be. And I feel like there's like 12 examples of that in the show right now.
Have you read any of like the theories from this episode?
No, I haven't. Since I just watched it last night, I have not gotten to dive into any of that.
So there's one that I think is kind of interesting on this conversation of like, what is the master plan and where could this go?
Yeah.
There's been kind of like this conversation we've had around really how much of this is actually like Miss Minutes, like, you know, forget him, I'm gonna do my own thing, and then how much of that is like fake.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
is she putting on a front, really? Right. And I saw an interesting theory about Miss Minutes when before she gets shut down, how she says you'll never be him. Like this was something said intentional, to embolden him to feel like to try to prove himself.
Yeah.
But the theory goes on to say, and this isn't like in one singular place, I've seen it mentioned several times now, actually, that Victor Timely getting spaghettified is actually like distributing his essence across all the timelines, and like ensuring his existence. I don't know. I can't give credit really.
Yeah,
you do it justice, I guess.
I get
but
what
that
you're saying.
Even his death is like perhaps an intentional move by He Who Remains.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, is it that? And like this has all been orchestrated and manipulated, and like Miss Minutes saying that to him was all part of the plan. Like she knew she was going to get shut off. Like it was all part of this manipulated plan. Or, you know, is she going rogue and doing her own thing? But so on that subject, I feel like I feel like it could cleanly go either way, but right now I think I'm leaning toward this was all part of the plan.
I think so too. Yeah.
Because the way it's presented in this episode is that Miss Minutes, for lack of a better term, I'm just going to say is going rogue, meaning she's like not doing what anyone told her, and she's just out for herself. Like, Renslayer, you and I could run this place. So like that's kind of how it's presented. You know, like she's mad at Kang, right? She's mad at He Who Remains, so she's doing her own thing now. But then if that were the case, that last line doesn't make much sense, because that last line is like in admiration of Kang, you know? Like, you'll never be him. Like if she was truly like done with him, mad at him, why would she say that, you know?
Right.
So that's like the main thing for me to be like, okay, I think this is all just prime manipulation.
Yeah.
Now, I have another thought that's like connected to this, but it kind of changes the subject. So I don't know. Like, let me just look at
Well,
my notes real quick.
yeah, I guess before you change the subject, just on this conversation of like the Grandmaster plan, like we've said this before. I feel like we know the writers have taken inspiration from other timey-wimey even shows kind of like this in
Yeah.
a sense. And we've said it, I've said it many times, like I feel like there's like a Matrix vibe here of um every time the Matrix collapses, like they have to restart and start again. And I think, we know everyone's memory, we got that confirmed that their memories have been wiped.
Yeah.
But I feel like even more than that, there have been multiple iterations of the TVA. And like the whole Ouroboros eating his own tail, which could, I guess, on a lighter note, making sure we're not like Mephistoing or anything, on a lighter note, could have just been like the exactly what we saw on the show, like who really inspired whom, or who or whatever. But either way, I think it would be very interesting if like the TVA is destined to fail at some point. The loom is destined to be destroyed at some point, and he who remains knows this. And this whole thing, this manipulation, having Victor Timely die, like these are all very key steps to always make sure that this specific Kang ends up at the end of time. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
With end of time being a bit of a misnomer, it's not the actual end of all time. It's just the end of every cycle, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, Ouroboros is the cycle. There's been a lot of like cycles in this show and in the MCU.
It's implies infinity almost, like it just continues endlessly.
And the sacred timeline, I believe, is like a circle, right? Like when we saw it like in season 1 zoomed out, I think it was like a circle. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also, which is another point I wanted to bring up, but it kind of slots in nicely here. The whole theme of Ragnarok, which even was brought up in season 1, because our Loki didn't experience it because he was plucked out, after Avengers. But he's reading about it in the TVA archives in season 1. This like Ragnarok must happen. It's part of like the Asgardian thing. Like it always happens. It's unavoidable. Like maybe that same concept is true for the TVA. So like you were saying, like he who remains has to set up the pieces. Like he can't just chill for the rest of eternity. Like he knows this cycle must happen. So this is his, contingency plan.
Interesting about that is we got another nod to Ragnarok in episode 2 when they were in the World Fair, where they were looking at the different statues for Asgard or whatever.
Yeah.
And what's the character's name that Loki was like, why is he even mentioned?
Balder.
The death of Balder is, I think, the first or one of the first events that precipitates Ragnarok happening.
That's right.
So, which I thought, why? I was just thinking, like, why did the show writers have Balder? Like, why is there even a mention of Balder?
Right.
Well, maybe they're nodding back to, like, hey, Ragnarok, it's happening, it's coming. Which, if we think about this theory that exactly what you just said, it would be a very subtle analogy to what will always happen with the TVA. There will always be the loom's destruction or what have you.
Yeah, I like that because it is kind of like it was too intentional to just be random that Balder was there, explicitly like called out and mentioned, and that Loki wasn't. Like it was really like, why wasn't Loki part of that? Like that was really weird to me. The initial thoughts I had, I don't know if you heard this, but for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Balder was originally going to be, I think, one of the Illuminati, played by Daniel Craig. Like they got like really far in like the casting, and I don't know why it like fell apart. But that was my first thought when I saw that. Like when they mentioned it, I was like, oh, maybe this is a little Easter egg about that. But I like what you're saying way more, that this is like intentional and kind of alluding to the Ragnarok thing, because this show feels more intentional than like the random, like just a stupid casting Easter egg thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that. Plus I like that. And I mean, at the end of this episode, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure, but like Ragnarok is essentially happening, seemingly. And I like that to parallel the characterization of like MCU Loki to TV show Loki. Like I would just mention, TV show Loki didn't experience Ragnarok, but now he is in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked that. But to cycle back real quick to our whole main discussion we were having there is like, if this was the whole plan all along from He Who Remains, what's interesting to think about, and we touched on this, I think, in our last episode, but at the end of season 1, you know, the whole dichotomy was kill me and much more of me will come, or, you know, take my place and keep it going or whatever. Well, they kill him, and the implication is like time's gone crazy. But just like we've talked about, like time really hasn't gone crazy yet because the temporal loom is keeping things in order, you know, but it's reaching critical mass or whatever. So if, even though they killed Kang, if he really did want to come back, like want the next multiversal version of himself to come back, he needs the loom to blow up, because right now things are still, even though it's like getting chaotic, like things are still contained. So like for his plan to truly be enacted, Ragnarok almost has to happen, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
therefore maybe this was like, maybe these are all machinations to ensure that things don't get fixed, you know? So Miss Minutes is pulling the strings, which also her last line of like, you'll never be him, has to mean that there was more at play than just what was face value, because the face value plan was get Victor Timely the book so he can become Kang. But clearly you'll never be him. Like she knew Victor Timely was not He Who Remains. So like clearly there was another angle there.
I mean, clearly Miss Minutes hasn't even told Ravonna Renslayer what's happening here, because Ravona's even like, do what now? And it's like, yeah, put the book in the window. And so I mean, I think part of it is like knowing how sadistic Miss Minutes is. Like part of it was like just pettiness, like I hate you. But then I think there's more to it, like you said, of it's very unreliable information. Like she's telling Ravonna Renslayer this is like very important, but not in the way that we thought it was important. I very much think Victor Timely was meant to die, and maybe even in the way that he died as well. But I was going to say something else too about, interestingly enough too, we're having this sort of Ragnarok moment. It made me think of what was that past TVA that Loki, time jump to in the premiere and in the finale of last episode, where like we thought it was present day because they were looking at their temp pad, or they were seeing all the timelines were going crazy, and like, what do? We didn't know it was in the past. So like, has something like this happened before? And really, just for me, it just speaks to like the cyclical nature of, the sacred timeline gets formed.
Yeah.
He Who Remains dies or something. The loom explodes, and it all just starts again and again on a singular thread of time. So
yeah, that at least seems to be the case for my money. I keep thinking of like all these different things I want to dive into. On that note, which I just had this thought, so I don't know if this even is gonna make any sense, but we had the protections turned off, the magic dampeners, which was a lot of questions answered. So the Lokis can use their magic in the TVA now. Also, presumably, would the Infinity Stones work that are there?
Right? Wouldn't they?
So like there's that, but also like I wonder if whatever that was, not just the magic dampener, but whatever these things were that were in place that are now off, could that have anything to do with the way the TVA seemingly operated by different time travel rules? Like we said, what else, like with the TVA specifically, like whatever happened, whereas in other places it branches. Like could branches be true now with these protections off, or is that just not related at all?
Yeah, I don't know about the Infinity Stones since they just get thrown into a drawer. It seems like if they could still work, even with the magic dampeners off, that they'd be like, hey, for safety's sake, we should probably, the system reboots. Probably have these somewhere.
Right.
But
maybe nobody knew that except for OB and like Miss Minutes,
True.
But
Yeah.
I mean, you would think, well, Infinity Stones might operate under different. I know in the comics they only work in the universe they're from.
Right. But which is not the case.
Right. Because we saw
in game.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's going to be at play here. That's just like for me, that's just kind of like an interesting thing to think about. But like, I really don't necessarily see the stones being used this season. Do you?
I think it would be. I don't know. It feels like it would be going backwards.
Yeah, I feel like that's not going to happen.
I mean, that was a couple of years ago. So I don't know. Maybe it would work. Maybe it'd be like, oh, I remember we had the Infinity Stones, but I just don't know. I don't know if it would land well with me. So,
okay, so like I said, I got like 7 things I want to talk about, but back to the Miss Minutes real plan situation. I even think that, like we were saying, like if everything's been calculated and stuff, that the whole manipulation of Renslayer was calculated. Like Kang was like, hey, and at this point, reveal to her I wiped her memory.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Which that kind of answered some questions for us about, I think we were talking about last ep, like were they king and queen atop the throne and he got rid of her, which essentially is, I think, what happened. I still don't think that, not that she's not an AI, but I'm still not buying the chess bot origin story for Miss Minutes.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know we've thrown out, I think it's even been mentioned on social media, like, is it a Renslayer variant of some kind?
Yeah.
I will say I'm okay if that shoe never drops. Like if the plot never gets carried forward about that.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's very interesting how sadistic she is. Like I'm very curious Miss Minutes' origination.
Yeah, like could it be like an Ultron variant or something?
Yeah. Oh yeah. See, that's I think where it gets extremely interesting, honestly. But I will say, what else is like a really obnoxious writing trope is like when something crazy happens 2 episodes before the finale, and then instead of finding out like what happened in the next episode, they do like it's like a bottle episode, or it's like a flashback of So like I could see them. The Last of Us did this too, by the way. I hate when shows do this. I'm getting feisty on this one, but I don't ever watch the next time previews.
I didn't
either. I just don't want to get ruined. So I would love to get a Miss Minutes like from start to finish, like origination story. I don't want to get it in episode 5. So I'm like, let's keep the plot going. But I would be okay with it for like if we get a season 3, which hasn't been confirmed yet, getting that as like an episode 2. Something like that I think would be really, really cool.
I for the most part, I agree with you on the whole trope of cut away from the big moment, but I think it works sometimes. And in the hyper specific theoreticals, if we got like a Miss Minutes flashback, I think I would be okay with that because like I'm so interested in that.
Boo!
There's
Boo this man.
There's no way you like no case where that trope pays off for you. You just hate it.
I think I didn't like it in The Last of Us. I wouldn't like it here. I didn't like it in Lost, where like it was towards the end, and then there was like the whole like Richard origin story.
Yeah.
Which again, these aren't bad episodes ever.
Yeah.
Just like when they get slotted in the finale, like in the finale section.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why are we slowing the story down? Like, put this at the start, please. So
yeah, I mean, I understand that. That's a fair take.
I'm sure marketers much smarter than me like have the numbers and metrics about how it's actually like really good for engagement. Like the fact that it's such a consistent trope, I just can only assume that there's there's math behind it as to why it's so good for the show. But
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's just
anyway.
like, well, we set up this really interesting piece here and we cut away from it. People are going to keep watching until we go back to that, you know? Like, I'm sure at some level it's kind of that. But I hear you. The missed minutes would be like one of the only things that I could be like, okay, I'm cool with this. But if they did like something else, or maybe Mobius, and I guess it would also depend on like how long, right? Because if it was just like the opening vignette, like the first 5 minutes of the episode, and then it goes back, like, would you still have a problem with that?
No, I wouldn't. But I also think I'd be okay with Mobius because his identity is such, he's a main character and his identity is such a central point to the show that, like, for me, like that it's like a big question mark. It keeps getting brought up. So like, you know, I think sometimes when it's done in the past, it's like characters that are like side characters like Richard in Lost.
Yeah.
Who it's like, yeah, I want to know what happened, but also, you know, it doesn't really matter what happened to you. Or it's an interesting, it does answer questions, or it is interesting to the plot, but it's not necessarily like that important, I guess. I don't know. But like his origin, I'd be like, whoa, that's a mega thing we've been wondering. So,
which just since we're there already, like that has to be one of the things that's in the next 2 episodes, right? And like, I don't know, like, does it have to be something important? You know, I don't
think so.
Yeah, but I feel like it will be addressed.
I think that's what was a really great, I hate that they went backwards on this. I really liked in Star Wars, the new trilogy with what's her name? Rey. The whole question, like, who's her parents? Who's her parents? And then Kylo's like, they're nobody. Yeah. They're dead in a like, that was such a like, oh
yeah. I love that part.
I hate that they went away from that, you know, but I think sometimes like that, to speak to what you just asked, like, I think sometimes that's just as compelling, is they actually aren't, it wasn't like this big story. It's just, it was ordinary. It was mundane. So I'd be okay if it wasn't something epic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, me too. And that's another, like, to speak to both the acting and the writing as like a general term, something I really liked in this episode when Sylvie called him out on it, called Mobius out on it. Because he's scared, right? I mean, they talked about this in, I guess, what was it, episode 2, whichever one where Loki and Mobius were having pie. You know, his fear was that his life was good on the timeline. So it would be really interesting to see, like, he has a wife and kids, and like he's just been, you know, willfully ignorant this whole time.
He's married to a Tom Hiddleston variant.
Oh God, the fanfics are going crazy.
Yeah, I had it great.
They're just jet skiing together.
Yeah. No, they're like doubled up on a jet ski.
There we go. Yeah, there we go.
So, oh man, that's when I draw the line. It's too funny.
I want to find out about that. But yeah, I love just that characterization and the humanity of like being, ignorance is bliss. Like, he doesn't want to know because then it can't hurt him, you know?
Yeah. Would you want to know?
Oh man. I feel like if I'm in his shoes exactly, I feel like I would want to know, but I totally understand not wanting to look, you know? But I think I would have to look.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think hundreds of years deep in this thing, I would have to not know.
Yeah, you at that point you just can't.
I just think I would have to not know. Otherwise,
you're such a spoiler demon, though, man. I feel like
it's true.
I don't know if you'd be able to resist.
I might take a peek when no one's watching. So,
okay, to slightly segue here, the pie room, which I know you mentioned earlier.
What is going on with this?
Sylvie also accidentally ended up here, just like they did earlier. Like, something weird's going on.
Yeah, how do people keep accidentally finding their way? And for a show that's, I even though I knock them for lazy writing, for certain elements being so tightly written, like, there has to be something about like, well, oh, how did I find myself here? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And just having a whole room dedicated to very green key lime pie. It's very strange.
Yeah, there's absolutely something there, but I don't like.
It's like impossible to guess, right? Other than we have said like maybe it's it feels like the strongest tie is what we said last episode about how Mobius, despite memories being wiped, had sort of like the subconscious memories of like how to get to Obi's room. And like it seems like that is the strongest tie, is like they spent time in the pie room. It was, but surely Sylvie, that's where it threw a wrench for me, because I thought, well, surely Sylvie hasn't spent a lot of time here in the past, but maybe she has. I don't know.
It reminded me of, and not it's not that similar, but in the way it's found, reminded me of the room from Harry Potter. Do you remember where like it appeared when you needed it, and like whatever was it, and it held inside of it whatever you needed?
No.
So not like the inside of it completely not the same at all, but the fact that like you can't go to it, you just kind of end up there. That's what it's reminding me of, which makes me think like there's some sort of like sentience to the TVA. Like how can people just like end up there when they're not even trying to go there? And I bet it almost seems like you couldn't go there if you were trying to, which there's no evidence of that, but yeah, I don't know like what. And there's always like deep conversations held there. And no one else is ever there, which is weird. Which also plays into the fact that like you can't go there if you're trying to almost.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe could it have something to do with memory? Like either eating the pie gets the nutrients in your system that Kang then manipulates to wipe your I'm not saying it's that exactly, but like could have something to do with the fact that they are kept as like mindless drones almost.
Seems like you wouldn't want people to accidentally find themselves there unless you wanted them to.
Right. Like, well, yeah, I guess if it was like a way that they were being controlled.
Maybe it was like an air tag in the pie or something. So.
But is it like, that's the only food we've ever seen, right? I haven't watched season 1 since it aired, so I don't remember if they were like, no, I think they were eating in season 1. I feel like I remember like a cafeteria scene. But maybe it was when they were on the timeline.
It feels like some of this is like we just don't have the space for it, because like they're in the middle of like a massive civilization, but you never see anybody. They never seem to eat, sleep, shower. I think those things happen, but that for the sake of the show, it's like, So I think they eat, right? I mean
they eat because they ate the pie, and then also they ate like at McDonald's and stuff.
Right.
In addition to the pie, we've talked about this a few times now too, is that hot cocoa machine seems to like, it's been brought up almost in every episode. I feel whatever it is, I feel like there's something to be revealed about the pie and maybe the hot chocolate, like maybe anything that's consumed in the TVA, like is doing something, like helping with the memory manipulation, helping with like keeping them roided up to work 24/7. Like, I don't know, but it feels like there's something there.
And two sweet things, hot cocoa and pie. It's like two kind of treats or snacks, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Something going on there though.
Yeah. Something going on with the pie room.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, there might be multiple things, but one thing I definitely wanted to talk about is like the end of this episode and kind of like what happens next, like I kind of see two possibilities, to put it really simply. First one is Ragnarok happened, and the next 2 episodes are like the fallout of that. Meaning, I mean, clearly all the characters didn't just die. There's 2 more episodes to go. So like that blast wave could maybe be akin to pruning potentially, like, so they're not like evaporated, but they're sent to the Eliath world or whatever. Or by some metric, Ragnarok does not happen and it is able to be prevented. Like, this is just a glimpse at like, oh no, but then like maybe throughout the course of the next 2 episodes, via time travel shenanigans, Loki is able to like fix this.
I think we said something like that around episode 1 or 2. I think one of us said something like what if in some ways not just is it destined to fail, but like are they then going to be realizing they have to now stop what actually happens? The only like issue with it is it seems to like rub up against the TVA being like a singular timeline thing, which this is all,
Right.
This is getting kind of interesting too, because it's the I can't think what it's called, but like Loki pruning himself, for example. Like how could Loki
Right.
prune himself when if he hadn't originally been, you know what I'm saying? Like the whole thing is, I can't think what that
Yeah, it's like
expression is called.
the grandfather part paradox.
Yeah, it is a paradox though. That's the word I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see like how much of that comes into play. Knowing that this is like all the timelines that are like exploding, I wonder if like they're going to get thrown across like a bunch of different times or something.
I think that has to be that has to be an element.
I also wonder like what's happening in the MCU.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if they're going to address that at all, because if all the timelines explode, I mean,
well, they're not necessarily. Well, so the way I'm understanding it,
but like,
the way I'm understanding it, the MCU as we know it, all the movies and stuff we've seen have always been the sacred timeline, which is what's been like intentionally kept pure. And it seems like all the chaos of this season is on the other side of things, like the new ones being born. So now that it's exploded, like if that actually like does damage to timelines is yet to be seen. But up until this point, I would assume that the MCU has been fine because it's been one of the pre-established ones. So it wouldn't have been one that was pruned or anything.
Well, and I didn't mean like the chaos of this season, like what's happening on Earth. I mean like this seemingly like Ragnarok-esque moment. Yeah. What's at the same time, or the fallout of it, how does that affect the MCU? I'm very curious about. Which maybe that is what leads to Secret Wars. Like maybe this is like the main plot thread for that.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I guess it's now open to the rest of the multiverse for other Kangs to come in, which they presumably are, given the Avengers movies we know that are coming. But yeah, so do you have a not like a guess necessarily, but are you leaning one way or the other as far as like, no, Ragnarok happens and we're dealing with it versus it's prevented?
I think I could see them have to go back and stop it from happening, even though that does, like I said, rub up against kind of what we've seen.
Right.
The other theory I have is like it was meant to happen, it was going to happen, and wherever they are, whether they're thrown across a bunch of different timelines, like their process is going to bring about like the restarting of the TVA, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I think that because of the rubbing, like you said, of what happens, at least thus far that we've seen in the TVA, unless that the magic dampeners being off change that. But it feels like it is going to happen, the Ragnarok, I mean. But I could see them doing the we got to prevent it somehow.
Right.
In either case, I 100% feel like Loki is going to be visiting different timelines in the past, present, and future to solve things, because I feel like that narrative thread was set up in the first episode when he was just blinking between them uncontrollably, and then it was solved by the end of the episode, which was still cool, and I enjoyed that plot thread. But I feel like that was like I feel like that has to be returned to. So regardless of the circumstances, I think that's where the story's going. Is Loki going to be, whether he can control it or if he's just randomly teleporting again, like put the pieces together in the different timeline to fix things.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited for.
I am as well. 2 episodes left on this great show.
Yeah.
Just too bad.
Oh, one other thing that I wanted to dive into if you still got time.
Yeah.
The whole OB Victor Timely thing, which this is a thing we talked about in all of our episodes thus far, of like, who is OB? Is he the real creator of the TVA? And I still think he is full-fledged, especially the knowledge that we have at the end of the episode where seemingly Victor Timely was just a pawn and wasn't really, I mean, he was clearly smart, but in the flashbacks of him at the World Fair, like he was a con man. His inventions didn't work. Like the loom he had at the fair got lightninged and then it blew up. The pants
but then
didn't work.
Obi did call him like would have been Albert Einstein with the right resources.
Right, but I don't know why Obi thinks that, but I think he's been manipulated or misled because I'm not happy with the paradox answer of they both influenced each other, because Victor Timely was a con man. His inventions didn't work. Everything he knew was from OB's book. So he still could have been like a smart guy, but like he didn't invent any of those things. It all came from the book he was given. Now, we don't know why Obi said he was inspired by Victor Timely. That's the part that doesn't really make sense, because like it would have to be a different Victor Timely, because this one never wrote down his own ideas in a book that Obi could have learned from, you know?
Yeah. Well, and we know this Victor was a branched timeline Victor.
True. Well, he came from the sacred timeline, but then it created a branch.
Exactly. It became a branched timeline once he got the book.
Right.
So maybe
the original
OG Victor Timely is where Obi got inspiration from.
That's really sad if so, because then they took this like brilliant guy's life,
right,
and just used him and made him not nothing, but you know, they robbed him of like a genius life.
Well, keeping it, in multiversal theory, that Victor still did happen, still had their, it's like, it's the whole theme of the show, like, pruning people, you're killing people. So,
yeah, but so I don't know how to, and that could be the case, what we just outlined. But for me, I still think that, and I don't know why OB would think that, because we know his memory can't be wiped. Well, I guess we don't know that, but his memory seemingly has not been wiped like other people's has. So I think that he still is the one that did everything, and he's just by some means been tricked or misled. Yeah.
I'll have to see. I am liking Obi. I love that actor.
Oh, the other point to this whole OB is the real one. He has the authority to reboot the system and lock out Miss Minutes.
Yeah.
Because surely not just anybody could do that. Like surely Mobius or Casey can't walk up and reboot the system.
Right.
And so why on earth would he have that authority or power? Like surely, so
there's definitely something going on between Kang and him, like we've said, but we may come to find that out in the next 2 episodes, hopefully, especially if we don't get a season 3. I mean, I definitely want some of these questions answered.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if we're getting one still or not.
I feel like if the people involved like want to, like if Tom Hiddleston is still down to wear the crown, how could they not? Like, I feel like I haven't really looked at the general reception to this show so far, but I know season 1 was beloved, and I'm pretty sure people have been happy with season 2. So like, especially with the mediocre slate that Marvel has been putting out, you got to imagine they would want to keep this up.
I don't know. The top 2 results are Loki season 3 probably not happening, and the next one, Loki season 3, is unlikely.
Why? I mean, I know you haven't like read the full article.
I haven't read the articles. They're just the headlines. And then the third one, the series is open-ended, but there's currently no 3rd season planned as of October 2023.
Well, I mean, it would make sense insofar as no other show has gotten a season 2, and like, clearly the events of both season 1 and 2 have been massive, setting up stones for the entire MCU, like with where we're headed with Kang Dynasty and stuff. So I can at least understand if like clearly season 2 is going to tee up all of that. Maybe they don't know what the direction of the MCU is going to be, and they don't know how Loki's TVA timeline would necessarily fit into like the next phase. So maybe this is copium, but maybe that's why they haven't like currently greenlit it. But it still could happen, type of thing, once they figure out where they're going next.
I mean, the MCU needs great content like Loki. I mean,
definitely.
Really, like since phase 4, I've been like so much less interested or much more disinterested. But
yep, Spider-Man and Black Panther were like the really only good things movie-wise. Yeah. I feel like.
Anyway. Well, let us know what y'all thought about the episode and your theories as to what these last 2 episodes might entail. And don't forget, we do have a Discord. You can join and talk about the show there as well. We also cover a lot of D&D and Critical Role and Worlds Beyond Number and Dimension 20 stuff. So you can check that out as well.
Yes, sir. Alrighty, y'all. Well, until next time. See ya.
See ya.